All the basic wheel throwing techniques from 4 different camera angles. Let's get started. I'll go through the entire process 4 times from 4 different camera angles and show every movement you need for wheel throwing. There will also be separate videos later where I'll explain each pull in detail. After centering comes opening and pulling up. Of course, we leave some clay at the bottom because this will later become the base of the vessel. I smooth this base with my fingers now because there will be no opportunity to do this later. Next comes what we called the setting pull in my apprenticeship. I slightly narrow the clay here, which gives the wall more stability before the next pull. Now I grip the clay between these 2 fingers of my right hand, almost like a pair of pliers, and pull it upward. In my apprenticeship, this was called the pincer grip. It is a very powerful technique and can already create a surprising amount of height. After the pincer grip comes the knuckle pull. I actually use my thumb joint here rather than my knuckle. There will also be a separate video about that, because I personally think this method works much better than the traditional knuckle version. Always compress the rim again between the pulls to calm it down. To wet the clay, I let the water run down along my hand so the wall is lubricated before every pull. Now I make a second knuckle pull. Most of the time that is enough. If you can see the wall starting to flutter and wobble like this, then I have reached the limit of what this clay can handle. We will talk about that later. You could call it a mistake, but it really isn't one. I can correct it because immediately after the knuckle pulls I use the serrated rib, and that can smooth the wall beautifully and correct many things. Today is not really about shaping the form. With the serrated rib you would normally continue shaping the pot, but basically this video is only about the throwing process. If you want to create a belly, you simply press a little more here. And with a straight rib like this, you can actually create almost any shape. We will probably cover almost every type of vessel that can be made from clay on this channel sooner or later. That is why I will not go further into shaping here. At the end, I remove the water from the pot. I smooth the rim once more with the sponge. We take our cutting wire, cut the vessel free, and move on to the next camera angle. If you have cut it free and it does not come off easily, try lifting it first at the point where the wire came out. You can also cut pots open from time to time. This is useful if you want to check how you threw it, whether the wall thickness is even, and whether it is too thick or too thin. I would say this one is evenly thin. Now let's move to this unusual camera angle. The camera is positioned at about 5 o'clock, almost behind me. From here, you can probably see the position of my hands and fingers during certain pulls better. You will not see much during the opening, but with the other camera positions we will see that much better. During pulling up, my right middle finger forms a curved hook, which I pull toward myself in the direction of 6 o'clock. Always imagine the pottery wheel as a clock face. When I talk about these clock positions, I mean the place where I am working. I have now made the setting pull, and next comes the pincer grip between the index finger and middle finger of my right hand, roughly at 4 o'clock. I pull upward while the left hand surrounds everything and supports the movement. Now comes the pull where this camera angle is probably the most useful. As I said, I use my thumb, press firmly inward, support it with the inside finger, and whenever possible I connect both hands. Then they work as one system and I can slowly pull both hands upward together in parallel. The speed during throwing always becomes slower. You center very quickly, and with every pull it becomes a little slower. There are exceptions, but for the beginning this is a good basic rule. I cut away the excess clay at the bottom with the serrated rib. Simply press down from top to bottom. Slow down a little more. Now I press with the rib from the outside and with my finger from the inside. The advantage is that I remove slip from the outside, so the clay does not become softer. This rib also has a much smaller surface area, so I reduce friction as well. If you create a change in the shape here at the top, the whole vessel becomes more stable. That is probably not a bad thing in the beginning. If the belly is not enough for you, you can repeat the step. If you cut in about 1 or half a centimeter above the wheel head, you can also create a foot on the vessel later. Today is not about the shape. Remove the water and cut it free. Especially at the beginning, lifting the vessel off the wheel is difficult. Nevertheless, especially as a beginner, I recommend that you avoid any kind of help for this. You have to learn it. The more often you do it, the easier it becomes. It will first lift at the place where the wire came out last, and then it becomes easy. That is how you learn it. Now let's look at it from above. If you have just cut off a pot and the clay left on the wheel is not wet, then the next lump of clay will stick wonderfully to this remaining clay. I start centering slowly, and when the lump no longer has any major wobble, I can increase the wheel speed fully. I open the clay with my right thumb and move straight down. Of course, not all the way down, because we need to leave a bottom. At the beginning, it helps to take a needle tool and push it into the bottom to get a feeling for the thickness. If you cannot feel it, put some slip on the needle, push it in, and then you can see the thickness. Always remember that the wire will also remove some clay from the bottom later. During pulling up, as I said, the right middle finger leads the movement. I bend the finger like a hook and pull toward myself. With my right hand, I usually smooth from the inside toward the outside. At least that is how I learned it. But to save time, sometimes I also work from the outside toward the inside. For me, it does not matter. The important thing is that it is straight. You can feel that. If you want, you can make a small spiral in the bottom, because you will not reach that area again later. Now comes the setting pull. My thumb presses from the inside and the little finger of my right hand supports from the outside. I have only narrowed the wall slightly. Now I use the pincer grip. I take the thin section at the bottom and pull it all the way upward. The left hand surrounds and supports the movement. Compress the rim again. Wet the wall for the knuckle pull. And as I said, this is how I do it, with the middle finger supporting from the inside. Everything happens at about the 5 o'clock position. You cannot really see it from here, but every camera angle has advantages and disadvantages. Again, I remove excess clay with the rib from top to bottom. Then I smooth the wall once. The inside finger is at the same height as the edge of the rib or slightly behind it in the direction of rotation, never in front. Since we would not really see the shaping from this angle, I will leave that out. Remove the water and we move to the final camera position. When cutting the vessel free, press the wire firmly onto the wheel head with both index fingers. Clean your hand's grip as low as possible, tilt it forward slightly and lift it up. Finally, let's look at the front view. Wet the clay. Remove the rough, uneven parts first, then gradually increase the speed until the clay is finally centered. Bring the lump into a good height to diameter ratio. Now open straight down with the thumb. You can see that my hands are touching each other. This helps enormously because they do not wobble as much. The finger as a hook pulls in the direction of 6 o'clock. This helps prevent moving too much up and down. That way the bottom becomes nice and straight. Smooth the bottom, setting pull here. And pincer grip. It is good if you even bring it slightly inward, at least so it rises cylindrical. But do not immediately fight against centrifugal force by pushing it outward. We cannot directly observe the knuckle pull from this angle, only what happens afterward. You do not always have to pull all the way to the top. If a thicker ring of clay remains here at the top, it is called a tension ring, and it gives the vessel a lot of stability. In the past, when pottery was fired with wood, almost all vessels had such rims because they were stacked rim against rim. It was very useful to have a stronger area there, because it could compensate and carry the weight. But even in everyday use today, a thicker rim is not a disadvantage. Since I was just talking about the past, I will quickly make an old-fashioned storage jar. It starts with a straight section at the bottom, then gets a belly, and finally a particularly strong shaped rim. This was because people used to cover these storage vessels with pigskin and tie it around with a cord. So now you have seen the pulls in sequence from 4 different directions. I will now make a separate video about each individual pull. I hope you stay curious.